Saturday morning at Riverside Country Club meant one thing. Dad's weekly humiliation session disguised as golf. For 8 months now, I'd been avoiding these invitations, but today he'd practically begged me to join him and his prestigious foursome. Mr. Davidson from Davidson Industries, Mr. Chin, who owned half the downtown real estate, and Dr. Williams, the heart surgeon who'd operated on 2 senators. Just 9 holes, sweetheart, Dad had pleaded over breakfast. Mr. Davidson keeps asking about you, and I think some networking would be good. Networking. Right. So here I stood on the first tee at 8:15 a.m., wearing chekis and a polo shirt, looking like every other country club disappointment trying to blend in with the establishment. Dad was already setting up his shot, and I could feel the weight of the conversation he was about to have. "Gentlemen," Dad announced as his golf partners approached, "you remember my daughter, Sophia." Mr. Davidson, silver-haired and radiating the confidence of old money, smiled politely. "Of course. How's the job search treating you, dear?" There it was, the question that had been haunting Dad's Saturday mornings for months. "She's taking her time to find the right opportunity," Dad answered quickly, before I could speak. "Being selective about her next move." Being selective. That's what Dad called my apparent unemployment to his successful friends. Mr. Chin nodded sympathetically while adjusting his golf glove. "Smart approach. Market's tough for recent graduates right now. No shame in living at home until something opens up." Recent graduates. I was 31 with a PhD from MIT. But to these men, I was still the college kid they remembered from Christmas parties 5 years ago. Actually, I started, but Dad's gentle hand on my shoulder stopped me. "Sophia's been doing some consulting work," he said, keeping her options open. Consulting work. I almost laughed. That was one way to describe running a quantum energy company that had just revolutionized power grid storage. Dr. Williams paused his practice swing to join the conversation. "You know, if you're interested in healthcare administration, I have connections at Presbyterian Hospital. Good benefits, room for advancement." "That's generous," I replied carefully, "but I'm focused on the energy sector." "Energy?" Mr. Davidson's eyebrows rose. "Tough field to break into without connections. Very technical, lots of established players. Maybe consider something more entry-level first." Entry-level. The man was giving career advice to someone who held 17 patents in renewable energy integration and had just signed the largest federal energy contract in history. "She's always been interested in science," Dad explained, his voice carrying that familiar note of resigned disappointment. "We're hoping she finds something stable while she figures out her long-term goals." Long-term goals. As if building the company that was about to transform global energy infrastructure was just a phase I'd outgrow. "The key is managing expectations," Mr. Chin said, lining up his first shot. "Young people today get these grandiose ideas about changing the world, but you need to be realistic." Grandiose ideas. My grandiose idea currently had a market valuation of $4.2 billion, but sure, I should probably aim lower. "Exactly," Dr. Williams agreed. "Find something steady, build experience, maybe pursue your passions as a hobby later." A hobby. My hobby had just received a personal congratulations call from the President of the United States, but I kept that observation to myself. "Sophia understands that," Dad said quickly. "She's just exploring her options." I understood why Dad was struggling. For months, he'd been fielding questions from his golf partners about his apparently unemployed daughter, the MIT graduate who seemed to be wasting her potential. What he didn't know was that I wasn't unemployed. I was the founder and CEO of Quantum Dynamics Corporation, and yesterday we'd announced a $2.8 billion contract to modernize the entire U.S. power grid. But because I hadn't told him, and because my lifestyle didn't scream billionaire entrepreneur, he assumed I was failing. What might help, Mr. Davidson said, pulling out his phone, is updating your LinkedIn profile. I took a look after your father mentioned you were job hunting. Honestly, it's pretty bare. No recent employment, no professional headshot. My LinkedIn profile. The one I deliberately kept minimal, because every time I updated it, I got overwhelmed with speaking requests and investment opportunities. I appreciate the feedback, I managed. And consider relocating, Dr. Williams added. Energy jobs are really concentrated in Houston and Denver. Can't build a career from your laptop at home. From my laptop at home. I'd built a multi-billion-dollar company from the converted warehouse I'd purchased for $3.2 million cash, but apparently, that didn't count as a real workplace. She's not living at home, Dad corrected quickly. She has her own place. It's just modest. Modest. Dad's diplomatic way of saying he was embarrassed by my lifestyle choices. Nothing wrong with modest, Dr. Williams said kindly. But eventually you want something that reflects your ambitions. Image matters in business. Image matters. Last week, I'd had dinner with the Secretary of Energy to discuss grid modernization policy. But apparently, I needed to work on my professional image. The real key is networking, Mr. Davidson continued, warming to his role as career counselor. Can't just submit applications online. You need face-to-face connections. Like today, Dad said hopefully. This is exactly the kind of networking Safia should be doing. Mr. Chen finished his shot and walked over. You know what? I have a niece about your age who went through something similar. Took 2 years to find her footing, but she's doing well now in marketing. Sometimes it just takes patience. Patience. I'd had plenty of patience during the 3 years I'd spent in stealth mode, building revolutionary quantum storage technology, while everyone assumed I was wasting my education. The important thing, Dr. Williams said as we moved toward the second tee, is not letting pride interfere with practical opportunities. I see young people turn down good entry-level positions because they think they're overqualified. Overqualified. 3 months ago, I'd been the keynote speaker at the International Energy Summit, but maybe I was being too picky about job opportunities. Safia's not like that, Dad said, though I heard the uncertainty in his voice. She's always been practical. Practical, like spending $180 million of my own money on research and development before anyone else realized quantum storage was commercially viable. Very practical. You know what might help, Mr. Davidson said, is if we made some introductions. I know people in energy, nothing high level, but good entry points. Entry points. He was offering to help me get entry-level positions in an industry where I was about to become one of the most influential leaders. That's very kind, I said, because it genuinely was, even if it was completely unnecessary. We should set up informational interviews, Dan said, his excitement growing. Help Sophia understand how the industry really works. Understand how the industry works. I held more renewable energy patents than anyone under 40, but apparently I needed informational interviews to grasp basic industry concepts. We'd made it through 4 holes with more career counseling than golf, and I was starting to feel genuinely sorry for Dad. He'd clearly been making excuses for my apparent failure for months, trying to maintain his reputation among friends who all had successful children. What you really need, Mr. Chen said as we waited for the group ahead to clear the green, is a mentor. Someone who's navigated the business world successfully. Excellent idea. Dad agreed immediately. Safia would benefit tremendously from that kind of guidance. A mentor. My board of directors included the former Secretary of Energy, a Nobel Prize winner in physics, and the founder of Europe's largest renewable energy company. But perhaps they weren't the mentors Mr. Chen had in mind. I'd be happy to help, Mr. Davidson offered. Start with basics. Proper cover letters, interview techniques, professional presentation. Professional presentation. 2 months ago, Anderson Cooper had interviewed me for 60 minutes about the future of clean energy. But sure, maybe I needed help with basic communication skills. And confidence building, Dr. Williams added. You've been pretty quiet today. In business, you need to advocate for yourself. Quiet. I was quiet because I was trying to navigate a conversation where 4 successful men were giving remedial career advice to someone who'd accomplished more in their industry than they had in theirs. She's always been reserved, Dad explained. But you're right. She needs to learn self-promotion. Self-promotion. Forbes had called me the most transformative energy entrepreneur of the decade, but apparently I needed help getting my message out. As we approached the 5th tee, Mr. Davidson pulled out his phone again. You know what? Let me call my friend Mark Thompson right now. He runs a renewable energy consulting firm, small operation, but perfect for someone starting out. Starting out. He was about to offer me entry-level employment at a company that probably licensed technology my patents had made possible. That's really not necessary, I started. Nonsense, he waved me off. Mark's great with young people. Let me just... He was actually calling someone to get me a job. The gesture was so genuinely kind and so completely misguided that I felt awful for not stopping him. Mr. Davidson, before you... No need to be nervous, he said, dialing. Mark's very approachable. Dr. Williams nodded approvingly. This is exactly what you need, Safia. Sometimes one person believing in you opens all the doors. One person believing in me. The president had personally called to congratulate me on our Department of Energy contract, but Mr. Davidson's faith was touching too. Really, that's not. Mark, Bill Davidson here. I have a brilliant young woman who might be perfect for that junior analyst opening. Junior analyst. I was about to be recommended for a position analyzing the same market trends my company was creating. Yes, energy sector, MIT PhD, very sharp, just needs the right opportunity. That's when Mr. Chen, who had been half listening while setting up his shot, suddenly straightened and stared at me. Wait, he said slowly. What did you say your last name was? Morgan. Safia Morgan. His eyes narrowed as he studied my face. Why do you look so familiar? Dad glanced over, still half focused on Davidson's phone call. She has one of those faces. People always think they recognize her. But Mr. Chen wasn't satisfied. He pulled out his phone and started typing. Safia Morgan, Energy, NIT. I watched him Google me, knowing exactly what he was about to discover. Holy shit. Mr. Chen's face went white. Bill, hang up that phone. What? Mr. Davidson looked confused, still mid-conversation. Hang up the phone. Right now. The urgency in Chen's voice made Davidson quickly end his call. Mark, let me call you back. All 3 men turned to stare at Mr. Chen, who was looking at his phone like he'd seen a ghost. Gentlemen, Chen said slowly, I think we may have made a significant error. What kind of error? Dr. Williams asked. Chen turned his phone around so they could see the screen. It showed yesterday's CNBC interview. Me sitting across from the anchor with the tire I'm reading. Sophia Morgan, CEO, Quantum Dynamics Corp. $4.2 billion federal contract. The silence that followed was absolute. Dad's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and then something approaching shock. Yesterday's CNBC interview. Chen read aloud. CEO Sophia Morgan discusses revolutionary quantum storage technology and $2.8 billion Department of Energy contract. Davidson slowly lowered his phone. You're the quantum energy CEO from the news. The one who solved grid storage, Dr. Williams added, his voice barely audible. The youngest person ever to sign a multi-billion-dollar federal energy contract, Chen finished. All eyes turned to me. Yes, I said simply. That's me. Dad's golf club slipped from his hands and clattered onto the tee box. But Davidson struggled for words. Your father said you were looking for work. I didn't say that, I replied gently. Dad said that. Everyone turned to stare at Dad, who looked like he'd never seen me before. Sophia, he said slowly, when you said you were working in energy, you meant you own an energy company. I founded it, built it from nothing over the past 3 years. 3 years, Chen repeated. The same 3 years your father's been telling us. You were figuring out your direction. I was figuring out my direction. I just figured out how to revolutionize clean energy storage in the process. Dr. Williams was frantically scrolling through articles on his phone. Forbes 30 Under 30, Time's Most Influential Leaders, Nobel Committee nomination. The consulting work, Davidson said weakly, looking at Dad. Apparently meant running a Fortune 500 company, Dad replied. The absurdity was finally hitting them. They'd spent an hour giving career advice to someone who'd just transformed the energy industry. The entry-level positions we discussed, Mr. Chen said, shaking his head. We were trying to help you get junior roles in an industry where you're apparently one of the most important people. And the networking advice, Dr. Williams added. We told you to meet people in energy. While she's probably on speed dial with every major player in the sector, Davidson finished. Dad was still staring at me in shock. Sophia, why didn't you tell me? Because every time I tried to explain what I was building, you seemed to think I was being unrealistic. Remember when I mentioned the patent applications? You worried I was spending money I couldn't afford on pipe dreams. Dad winced. I remember. And when I told you about the research facility, you asked if I could afford the rent. Research facility, Chen interrupted, checking his phone. You mean the 50,000 square foot complex downtown that everyone's been trying to identify the owner of? That's the one. I bought it 2 years ago and converted it into a quantum research lab. You own the old semiconductor plant? Bought it for $18 million. Cash. The 3 men exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Sophia, Dad said quietly, what is your company actually worth? As of yesterday's market close, $4.2 billion. Though that was before the federal contract announcement, so probably closer to $6 billion now. And your personal stake? 73%. More silence as they did the math. So you're worth, Chen began, about $4.5 billion. Dad sat down heavily on the bench. $4.5 billion. It fluctuates, but yes. The modest apartment I've been worried about is a converted warehouse I'd bought for $3.2 million. I like the industrial aesthetic. And you don't drive a luxury car because I think conspicuous consumption is wasteful. The Honda gets me where I need to go. Dr. Williams looked up from his phone. Says here you're speaking at Davos next month. Next week, actually. Panel on Sustainable Energy with the German Chancellor. And you've been appointed to the President's Science Council. Accepted that position last month. Davidson looked physically ill. Sophia, I just tried to get you a $45,000 a year analyst job. It was thoughtful of you. I told Mark Thompson you were smart and just needed a break. You meant well. Chen was shaking his head. Your father's been apologizing to us for months about your career struggles, while his daughter was busy becoming one of the most successful entrepreneurs of her generation. Williams added. And we've been feeling sorry for him, Davidson said, having such a brilliant child who couldn't find her way. Dad looked up at me with something between awe and embarrassment. Sophia, the worry I've been carrying. I know, Dad. I'm sorry I didn't handle this better. I just got tired of arguing about whether my goals were realistic. Realistic, Chen muttered. We were telling the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company to be more realistic about her career expectations and to consider entry-level positions, Williams added. In companies that probably license her technology, Davidson finished. The irony was overwhelming for all of them. When Mark asks why I hung up, Davidson said weakly, what do I tell him? You could explain that you discovered the person you were trying to help actually owns patents that his company uses. Dr. Williams started laughing. Genuine, incredulous laughter. Bill, you just tried to get the founder of Quantum Dynamics an entry-level position at a firm that pays her licensing fees. It's not funny, Davidson protested, but he was smiling too. It's a little funny, Chen agreed. We spent an hour giving business advice to someone who probably knows more about building companies than all of us combined. Dad was shaking his head slowly. I feel like such a fool. Don't. You feel like a father who was worried about his daughter's future. That's not foolish. That's loving. But I've been making excuses for you to my friends for months. And now you can tell them your daughter just signed the largest clean energy contract in U.S. history. The mood was finally shifting from shock towards something that might eventually become pride. The confidence advice we gave you, Williams said, about speaking up for yourself, was actually good advice. Presentation skills always need work. But you've already presented to everyone who matters. I've presented to everyone who matters now. But I remember starting out and not knowing anyone. Your advice would have been valuable then. Davidson was putting his phone away. Sophia, when we were telling you about being confident in interviews, I was taking mental notes. Even successful people can improve their communication skills. You were humoring us. I was learning from you. Success in one area doesn't mean I can't learn from people successful in other areas. Chen nodded thoughtfully. That's probably why you've achieved so much. You're still willing to listen, even when the advice comes from people who don't realize you're already far beyond where they're trying to help you reach, Williams added. We'd somehow turned a golf outing into the most surreal career counseling session in country club history. So what happens now? Dad asked. Do we finish the round? I looked at these four men who'd spent their morning trying to help someone they thought was struggling, only to discover their advice recipient was more successful than they'd imagined possible. I'd love to finish, I said. Though maybe we could talk about something other than my employment prospects. Deal, Dad said immediately. Though I reserve the right to ask about quantum energy storage, since apparently my daughter is reshaping the future of electricity, and I've been too worried about her rent to notice. That's fair. As we walked toward the 6th tee, Mr. Davidson fell into step beside me. Sophia, I hope you know everything this morning came from genuine care. I absolutely know that, and I'm grateful for it, even though our advice was completely off base. Your advice wasn't off base, it was misdirected. But the impulse to help someone succeed, that's never wrong. He smiled. Your father raised a very gracious daughter. He raised someone who understands that successful people lift others up, even when they don't realize how high that person has already climbed. And with that, we finished our round, not as a worried father and his struggling daughter, but as a family learning to see each other clearly for the first time.
I watched through the one-way glass as my parents shifted uncomfortably in the leather chairs of the bank's executive conference room. Time had changed them. Father's hair now completely silver, mother's perfect posture slightly stooped. But their air of entitled superiority remained intact even as they prepared to beg for financial salvation. The Chen family's request for a $50 million emergency loan. Thomas, my CFO, reviewed the file in front of me. Their real estate empire is on the verge of collapse. Overextended, overleveraged, and severely impacted by the market downturn. I nodded, studying my parents' faces. They hadn't seen me in 20 years, not since the night they'd thrown me out for choosing love over their arranged marriage plans. My name is Victoria Chen, and 2 decades ago, I was the perfect daughter of one of San Francisco's wealthiest families. Then I fell in love with James Walker, a brilliant software engineer from a working-class background. My parents' response had been swift and absolute: marry their choice, wealthy real estate heir Andrew Kim, or be cut off completely. I chose James. They don't know you own Meridian Bank? Thomas asked quietly. No, I replied, remembering the day I'd walked away from my family's wealth and privilege. They probably assume I'm living in some middle-class suburb, married to my poor husband. The irony wasn't lost on me. James's software innovations had made us billionaires within 10 years of our marriage, while my parents continued building their real estate empire the old way, through connections, leverage, and family money. We quietly revolutionized financial technology. 5 years ago, we'd bought Meridian Bank as part of our expansion into financial services. Now, watching my parents await their fate in that conference room, I thought about all they'd missed. Our wedding, celebrated with friends who loved us for who we were, not what we owned. The birth of our children, now teenagers who'd never met their grandparents. Every success, every milestone, every moment of the life they deemed beneath them. Their financials are worse than they're admitting, Thomas continued, flipping through reports. Without this loan, they'll default on multiple properties within months. The Chen empire will collapse. I studied the papers in front of me. The numbers told a clear story. My parents had overextended, betting big on luxury developments just before the market turned. Their old methods of doing business, relying on personal relationships and social connections, hadn't adapted to changing times. Mrs. Walker. Thomas's voice pulled me from my thoughts. How would you like to proceed? Before I could answer, the conference room door opened and Robert Nash, our senior loan officer, entered to meet with my parents. I turned up the room's audio. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, Robert began formally. I've reviewed your loan application. Surely you know our reputation, my father interrupted, his voice carrying that familiar note of aristocratic assumption. The Chen family has been a pillar of San Francisco society for generations. Yes, sir, Robert replied smoothly. However, in today's market, reputation alone isn't sufficient security for a loan of this magnitude. My mother's back stiffened. We have collateral. Properties, assets. All heavily leveraged, Robert countered. Your debt-to-equity ratio is concerning and your recent projects have significantly underperformed projections. This is merely a temporary setback, my father insisted. The market will turn. When? Robert asked simply. Your nearest loan payment is due in 6 weeks. Without this financing, you'll default on at least 3 major properties. The silence that followed was heavy. I watched my parents exchange glances, decades of certainty in their own superiority crumbling in real time. Perhaps, Robert continued carefully, you have other resources, family members who could assist. My mother's face tightened. Our only daughter is no longer part of the family. Ah, yes. Robert consulted his notes with practiced casualness. Victoria Chen, now Victoria Walker. Quite successful in technology and banking, I believe. Her company's market cap recently exceeded $20 billion. I had to admire Robert's technique as he let that information sink in. My parents' expressions shifted from dismissal to shock as they processed the reality of their disowned daughter's wealth. Victoria, my father's voice cracked slightly. That's impossible. She married that engineer. James Walker, Robert supplied, the founder of Walker Tech. Their financial software revolutionized banking infrastructure. Surely you've heard of them. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. We haven't had contact. For 20 years, Robert finished, since you disowned her for marrying beneath her social class. Though given current circumstances, one might question whose choice proved more financially astute. I almost smiled at the subtle dig. Robert was playing his role perfectly, letting my parents face the full impact of their past decisions. The loan, my father tried to redirect, his voice less certain now. Surely our assets are insufficient, Robert stated flatly. Without additional security or a guarantor, I cannot recommend approval. The weight of those words settled over the room. 20 years of certainty in their own superiority, their own rightness, crashing down in a single meeting. What? My mother's voice was barely audible. What are our options? Robert closed his folder deliberately. You could approach your daughter. Her resources could easily secure this loan. Though given your history, no, my father's pride surfaced briefly. We cannot. Cannot what? Robert's voice sharpened slightly. Cannot admit you were wrong? Cannot acknowledge that the daughter you rejected for marrying beneath her station has achieved more wealth and success than you imagined possible? My parents sat in stunned silence. In their world, bankers didn't speak to them this way. But their world was crumbling, and with it, all the old certainties. I'll leave you to consider your options, Robert stood. Though I should mention, you're not the only one seeking financing for distressed properties in this market. These opportunities don't last long. After he left, I watched my parents sit in silence, 2 decades of choices and consequences hanging heavy between them. Victoria, my mother finally whispered. All this time. We should go, my father stood abruptly. There must be other banks, other options. There aren't, I said softly to the one-way glass. I've made sure of that. Thomas looked at me questioningly. Your instructions? I thought about the night I'd left, carrying a single suitcase, walking away from wealth and privilege toward an uncertain future with the man I loved. I thought about James's quiet confidence as we built something together, something real. And I thought about our children raised to value character over class, innovation over inheritance. Let them stew for a few days, I decided. Let them face the reality of their situation. Then have Robert call them back for another meeting. And if they reach out to you directly? I smiled, remembering all the ignored letters over the years, the attempts to maintain their control through silence and rejection. They won't, I said certainly. Their pride won't let them. At least, not yet. As I watched them gather their things, my mother's hands shaking slightly as she picked up her designer handbag, my father's shoulders bent under the weight of impending failure, I felt no satisfaction, only a quiet certainty that sometimes life has a way of bringing things full circle. They walked out of the conference room, stepping into their waiting car, less luxurious than in years past, I noted, likely heading back to their mansion to regroup, to plan, to avoid facing the inevitable. But I knew what they did. Their options had already run out. Every major bank in the city was either owned by us or partnered with us. Every potential investor had been quietly warned away. The empire they'd built on social status and old money was about to collapse, leaving them with only one possible salvation: the daughter they'd rejected for daring to choose her own path. Thomas gathered the papers, pausing at the door. The next meeting? 3 days, I decided. Let's see how they handle the wait. As I stood to leave, I caught my reflection in the glass. Successful, confident, self-made. Everything they'd feared I'd never be without their guidance and control. Oh, and Thomas, I added, make sure Robert mentions that Meridian Bank recently came under new ownership. Let them start wondering exactly who they're dealing with. 3 days stretched into 5 as my parents explored every possible alternative to facing their situation. Through our extensive network, I tracked their increasingly desperate attempts to secure financing elsewhere. Each inquiry met with polite but firm rejections. They've started selling assets, Thomas reported, setting a folder on my desk. Their vacation home in Aspen, 3 luxury cars, your mother's jewelry collection. I picked up the folder, studying recent photos of my childhood home. The perfectly manicured gardens looked slightly overgrown now, the grand facade showing signs of deferred maintenance. And the company? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Share price is falling. Contractors are demanding upfront payments. 3 major projects are at risk of complete shutdown. The Chen family empire, built over 3 generations, was crumbling in real time. And still my parents resisted the obvious solution. Then came the call we'd been waiting for. They've requested another meeting, Robert announced, but with one condition. They want to meet the bank's owner. I closed my eyes briefly, 20 years of memories washing over me. Set it up. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. That evening, I told James about the meeting. He listened quietly as he always did, his brilliant engineer's mind processing the implications. Are you sure about this? He asked finally. We could buy their properties through intermediaries, save their company without revealing yourself. I shook my head. No, they need to understand exactly how wrong they were. About you, about me, about everything they thought they knew about worth and value. He pulled me close, and I breathed in the familiar scent of the man they deemed unworthy of their daughter. Whatever you decide, he said softly, I'm with you, just like always. The next morning, I dressed carefully, not in the designer labels my mother had insisted were essential to our social status, but in a perfectly tailored suit that spoke of confidence rather than wealth, success on my own terms. I'd arrived early, watching through the one-way glass as my parents were escorted into the conference room. They looked tired, the strain of impending financial ruin evident in their postures. Mrs. Walker. Thomas appeared at my side. They're ready. I took a deep breath. Let's finish this. The moment I walked into the conference room, time seemed to stop. My mother's hand flew to her throat, her face draining of color. My father half rose from his chair, sinking back as recognition hit him fully. Victoria, my mother whispered. Hello, Mother. Father. I took my seat at the head of the table, noting how their eyes tracked my every movement. I believe you wanted to meet the owner of Meridian Bank. The silence that followed was deafening. 20 years of rejection, of pretending I didn't exist, shattered by the reality of their current situation. You, my father's voice cracked. You own the bank. Among other things, I kept my tone professional. Walker Tech, my husband's company, you remember James, the unsuitable engineer, has grown significantly since you last saw us. All this time, my mother's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. You've been successful? Yes, I opened their loan application. Unlike Chen Developments, which appears to be on the verge of collapse, my father's pride made one last attempt. We don't need. Yes, you do, I cut him off. You need $50 million immediately to avoid default. Another $100 million within 6 months to stabilize your projects. Without it, 3 generations of the Chen family legacy disappears. They sat in stunned silence as I laid out their situation with brutal precision. How? My mother's voice trembled. How did you build all this? I gestured to our surroundings. Without your connections, your social circle, your arranged marriages, by understanding that true worth isn't about who you know or where you come from. It's about innovation, adaptation, seeing the future instead of clinging to the past. Victoria, my father leaned forward. Whatever happened, we're still family. Are we? I met his gaze steadily. 20 years ago, family meant controlling who I could love. It meant choosing status over happiness. It meant turning your back on your only daughter because she saw value in something beyond your narrow definition of worth. We were trying to protect you, my mother whispered. No, I corrected quietly. You were trying to control me. There's a difference. I pulled out another folder, photos of my life they'd missed. My wedding to James, the birth of our children, holidays, celebrations, moments of joy shared with people who loved us for who we were, not what we owned. Your grandchildren, I said, watching their faces as they stared at images of teenagers they'd never met. Emma's starting college next year, MIT, early admission. Michael's already developing his own software. They've never known their grandparents, never understood why their mother's family chose pride over love. Tears rolled down my mother's face as she touched the photos. My father's hands trembled slightly. The loan application, I continued professionally. I'll be direct, No other bank will help you. We made sure of that. Your only option is Meridian Bank, is me? What? My father swallowed hard. What are your terms? I placed a document on the table. Full disclosure of all assets and liabilities. Complete restructuring of management. You'll step down. Professional executives will be appointed. And I pause, letting the moment stretch. And my mother prompted. And you'll both attend Sunday dinner at my house. Every week, you'll get to know your grandchildren, not as heirs to a fortune, but as the remarkable people they are. You'll see the life you rejected, understand the happiness you dismissed as beneath you. They stared at me, decades of pride warring with desperation. If we refuse, my father asked quietly, then Chen Developments fails, your empire collapses, and you spend your retirement wondering if your social status was worth the family you lost. The silence that followed was heavy with 20 years of choices and consequences. When? My mother's voice wavered. When is dinner? Sunday at 6, I stood gathering my papers. Don't be late. Emma's making her grandmother's dumplings. The ones you taught me before status became more important than family. As I walked to the door, my father called out, Victoria, we were wrong. I turned back, seeing for the first time not the powerful parents who'd shaped my childhood, but two elderly people facing the consequences of their choices. Yes, I said softly. You were. The question is, are you ready to make it right? The following Sunday, at exactly 6 o'clock, a car pulled up to our house. Not their usual luxury vehicle, but a modest sedan. I watched through the window as my parents approached the door, clutching a bottle of wine and looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen them. Emma opened the door, the granddaughter they'd never met welcoming them with her father's warm smile and her mother's strength. You must be my grandparents, she said simply. Come in. Dinner's almost ready. As they stepped into the home I'd built with the man they'd rejected, I saw them take in the success their narrow vision hadn't been able to imagine, not in designer labels or imported furniture, but in the patents framed on the walls, the prototypes of James's innovations, the awards for contributions to technology and finance. Welcome, James stepped forward, the unsuitable engineer now a respected innovator. We've been waiting a long time for this. And as we sat down to dinner, 3 generations at one table for the first time, I watched my parents begin to understand what they'd really lost 20 years ago. Not status or social position, but the chance to be part of something genuine, something built on love and innovation rather than privilege and pride. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. That would take time, effort, and genuine change on their part. But it was a beginning. A chance to rebuild not just their company, but something far more valuable. A family connection based on who we were, not what we owned. The Chen Empire might have crumbled, but from its ruins, something more authentic could grow. If they were willing to learn, to change, to see value beyond their old definitions of worth. As Emma served her dumplings, perfect replicas of her grandmother's recipe, learned from my memories rather than direct teaching, I saw tears in my mother's eyes. Perhaps she was finally understanding that true legacy isn't about money or status. It's about the connections we build, the love we share, and the courage to choose what's real over what's expected. The future would be different from anything they'd imagined, but maybe, just maybe, it would be better than the life they tried to force me into all those years ago. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about making others suffer, it's about showing them exactly what they lost by being unable to see beyond their own prejudices. And as we ate together, this broken family taking its first steps toward healing, I realized that success truly is the best revenge, not because it proves others wrong, but because it proves you right for believing in yourself when no one else would.
I stood in the rain, watching the movers carry elegant furniture into my sister Emma's new mansion. A wedding gift from our parents. A $2.8 million house in the most prestigious neighborhood in Boston. Meanwhile, I lived in a small apartment above the bookstore where I worked, barely making ends meet. Isn't it perfect for them? My mother gushed, not noticing how soaked I'd gotten standing outside. Emma and James will be so happy here. And there's plenty of room for grandchildren. I forced a smile, thinking of the congratulations card I'd scraped together money to buy. It's beautiful, Mom. Emma emerged from the house, immaculate in designer clothes, her new engagement ring catching what little sunlight filtered through the clouds. "Madison, you finally made it. What do you think of our little starter home?" Starter home. As if a nearly $3 million mansion was just a stepping stone. "It's lovely," I managed. "The perfect wedding present." "Oh, don't be jealous, Maddie." Emma laughed, using the nickname I'd always hated. "I'm sure you'll find someone special too. Maybe one of those nice boys at the bookstore." Our mother jumped in. "You know the Henderson's son is still single. He's an accountant now. Very stable career." I bit my tongue. At 32, I had a master's degree in literature and was working on my first novel. But to them, I was just the family disappointment. The daughter who chose books over business, dreams over security. "I should go," I said quietly. "My shift starts soon." "On a Saturday?" Mom frowned. "But we're having a family dinner to celebrate Emma's house." "Some of us have to work weekends, Mom." Emma rolled her eyes. "Still so dramatic, Maddie. This is why you struggle, you know. Always choosing the hard way instead of accepting help." Help, like the full ride to business school I'd turned down. Like the position at Dad's firm I'd refused. Like the arranged dates with suitable men I'd avoided. What they never understood was that their help always came with strings. Golden handcuffs designed to shape me into their version of success. "The bookstore is short-staffed," I said, already turning to leave. "And I need the hours." "Well," Mom sighed, "at least take some leftovers home. I hate thinking of you eating alone in that tiny apartment." I didn't tell her that my tiny apartment was my sanctuary, a space filled with books, art, and peace. A place where I could write without judgment, dream without limits. The next morning, I stopped at Pete's corner store for my usual coffee. Pete, a grandfather figure who'd been running the shop for 40 years, greeted me with unusual excitement. "Madison, did you check your ticket?" I'd blinked, confused. Then I remembered the lottery ticket I'd bought 2 days ago. A silly impulse purchase with my last $5 when the jackpot had hit record numbers. "Not yet." I pulled the crumpled ticket from my wallet. "What were the winning numbers?" Pete's eyes sparkled. "Check the news, sweetheart." I pulled out my phone, finding the lottery website. The numbers appeared on screen. 7, 13, 24, 31, 42, 53. My hands started shaking. I looked at my ticket, then back at the screen. "Pete," my voice was barely a whisper, "I think I won." He grinned. "I know you did, honey. I watched them draw your numbers live last night. All 6 matching numbers. You just won $97 million. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I grabbed the counter for support. "Sit down before you fall down." Pete guided me to a chair. Deep breaths. "This is big news, but you need to be smart now. Don't tell anyone yet. Get a lawyer first. And for heaven's sake, sign that ticket." With trembling fingers, I signed the back of the ticket. Pete locked it in his safe, made me drink some water, and called his daughter, a respected financial attorney. "Caroline will meet you in an hour," he said. "She'll help you do this right." I nodded, still dazed. "Pete, my family." He squeezed my shoulder. "We'll find out soon enough. But right now, this is your moment. Don't let anyone take it from you." As I waited for Caroline, my phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Family brunch tomorrow to discuss wedding plans. Wear something nice for once, and try not to be late like always." I stared at the message, thinking of her mansion, her perfect life, our parents' endless praise. For 20 years, I'd been the family afterthought, the daughter they'd written off as impractical, unsuccessful, lost. Now I had 97 million reasons to prove them wrong. I texted back, "Sorry, can't make it. I have something more important to do." For once, I wasn't lying. 3 weeks later, I sat in my new lawyer's office, signing the final papers to claim my winnings. Caroline, Pete's daughter, had been invaluable, helping me set up trusts, investment accounts, and ironclad privacy protections. "Remember," she said, reviewing the documents, "once we submit these, your name becomes public record. Are you ready for that?" I thought of the changes I'd already made. I'd quietly resigned from the bookstore, leaving my manager a generous check to help hire and train my replacement. I'd bought a beautiful but modest house in a quiet neighborhood, using a trust to keep my name off public records. And I'd started the groundwork for my own publishing company, determined to help other overlooked writers find their voices. "I'm ready," I said firmly. The next morning, my face was splashed across every news outlet in Boston. Local writer wins $97 million lottery jackpot. Bookstore employee becomes multimillionaire overnight. Madison Bennett claims record-breaking prize. My phone exploded with messages. Old classmates, distant relatives, forgotten acquaintances, all suddenly remembering my existence. But the messages I was waiting for came last. First, Emma. "OMG, Maddie. Why didn't you tell us? Call me immediately." Then Mom. "Madison Elizabeth Bennett. How could you keep this from your family? We're coming over right now. Where are you living?" Finally, Dad. "Your mother is hysterical. Call us this instant." I turned off my phone and poured myself a cup of tea, settling into my new home office. Through the window, I could see the garden where I planned to create a reading nook. The morning sun painted everything in soft gold, making the moment feel almost magical. My doorbell rang. Through the security camera, another of Caroline's suggestions, I saw them. My parents and Emma, standing on my porch. Emma was dressed like she was heading to a photo shoot, while my mother kept smoothing her designer dress nervously. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Madison," my mother burst out. "We've been so worried. Why haven't you answered our calls? And how did you afford this house? The lottery money hasn't even been released yet and—" "Hello, Mother." I cut her off calmly. "Would you like to come in?" They filed into my living room, taking in the tasteful furnishings and wall-to-wall bookshelves with barely concealed surprise. "Well," Emma said, running a finger along the shelf, "I suppose now you can finally move to a better neighborhood. Maybe near my new house. There's a lovely little colonial for sale, only $4 million. "I'm happy here," I interrupted. "But thank you for your concern." "Maddie, darling." My mother leaned forward, her voice dripping with honey. "You have to understand our shock. This is life-changing money. You'll need guidance, proper financial advice. Your father knows several excellent wealth managers." "I have a team of advisors," I said. "And it's Madison, not Maddie." "Don't be difficult," Emma snapped. "We're trying to help. God knows you've never been good with money. Like that time I loaned you $10,000 for your starter business," I asked quietly. "The one you never paid back." Emma's face flushed. "That was different. I needed. What you needed was to take responsibility." I stood up, my voice steady. "Something none of you have ever expected from her. Now see here." My father finally spoke, his face reddening. We've always supported you both equally. I laughed. Actually laughed. Equally. You bought Emma a mansion for her wedding. You paid for her business school, her first car, her perfect wedding. What did you give me for graduation? A lecture about practical career choices. Because we worried about you. My mother cried. Your choices were so impractical. We just wanted. You wanted me to be like Emma. I finished. The perfect daughter. The sensible one. Well, guess what? My impractical choices led me here. My job at the bookstore, the one you all look down on, is where I bought the winning ticket. And now you can finally have a real life, Emma said, as if she was being generous. We can help you invest, get you into the right social circles. No. The room fell silent. What do you mean no? My father demanded. I walked to my desk and pulled out 3 envelopes. Emma, this is a cashier's check for $10,000, repaying the loan you've conveniently forgotten about. I handed her the first envelope. Mom, Dad, this is a check for $15,000, the total of every gift, every payment, every contribution you've ever made to my life. I've kept careful records. They stared at the envelopes, speechless. The third envelope, I continued, contains documents showing I've already established my own publishing company, created a charitable foundation for literacy programs, and set up my investments with one of the top firms in the country. I didn't need your guidance then, and I certainly don't need it now. But we're family, my mother whispered. Yes, we are. And family should love unconditionally. Support dreams, not squash them. Celebrate differences, not try to erase them. I walked to the door and opened it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with my foundation board about funding new libraries in underserved communities. You're making a mistake, my father said stiffly. You need us. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. No, Dad, you need me. And that's the real reason you're here, isn't it? Emma stood up, her face a mask of fury. You think you're better than us now? Because of some lucky numbers? No, Emma, I always was. You just never saw it. As they left, my mother turned back, tears in her eyes. Madison, please. We made a terrible mistake. We see that now. Can't we start over? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw for the first time how small she seemed. How all of them seemed, trapped in their narrow view of success and worth. Maybe someday, I said softly, but not today. I closed the door on their protests, walking back to my office. On my desk sat the manuscript of my novel, a story about a girl finding her voice in a world that tried to silence her. It was time to write the next chapter. 6 months later, the launch party for Bennett Publishing House was everything I dreamed of. We transformed an old warehouse into a magical space filled with books, art, and possibility. Local authors whose works we'd signed mingled with literary agents and journalists, while kids from our literacy program proudly showed off their own stories in a special display area. Pete stood beside me, beaming like a proud father. Look at what you've built, Madison, and not a penny wasted on showing off. He was right. While I could have easily bought a gleaming downtown office tower, I'd chosen to renovate this historic building instead, creating a space that felt like home to writers and readers alike. The millions I'd won had been carefully invested in education programs, in supporting new authors, in building something meaningful. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Saw your company in the business journal. Must be nice having everything handed to you. Betito. James lost his job. We could use some family support right now. I deleted the message without responding. Over the past months, they tried everything: guilt, manipulation, fake kindness, and finally, outright demands. Emma's starter mansion was apparently too small now. Mom and Dad's country club membership needed renewal. James's failed investments needed covering. I'd ignored them all. Miss Bennett? A young girl tugged at my sleeve. She was one of our literacy program students, clutching a notebook. Will you read my story? Of course, Sophie. I led her to a quiet corner, sitting down at her level. What's it about? A girl who finds a magic pen, she said shyly. Everything she writes comes true, but she has to figure out what's really important to write about. I smiled, thinking how wisdom sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. Madison. I looked up. My mother stood there, looking uncomfortable in the casual atmosphere. She'd lost some of her polished perfection. The past months had been hard on them, I knew. Dad's firm had lost several major clients. Emma's perfect marriage was showing cracks, and their social circle had begun to shrink as their resources dwindled. Mom, this is a private event. I know. I had to talk to you. She glanced at Sophie. Alone? I turned to Sophie. Why don't you show your story to Miss Sarah? She's our children's book editor. After Sophie scampered off, I faced my mother. Well, your father's company is failing, she said bluntly. Emma's house is being foreclosed. Everything's falling apart, and you're here playing with children's stories. I stood up, anger flaring. Playing? Look around, Mom. Really look. See those kids? They're learning to love reading, to believe in their own voices. See those authors? They're getting chances they never had before. I'm not playing, I'm building something real. But your family has never respected my choices. I cut in. Even now, you're not here because you care about what I've built. You're here because you need money. She flinched. We're still your family. Are you? I walked her over to our wall of success stories. Photos of children reading, authors signing their first contracts, community programs making real change. Family celebrates each other's victories. Family supports each other's dreams. When was the last time you asked about my novel? My goals? My happiness? I don't know. Exactly. I turned to face her. The lottery didn't change who I am, Mom. It just gave me the freedom to stop seeking approval I was never going to get. Tears filled her eyes. We were wrong. I see that now. But can't you forgive us? Forgiveness isn't the issue, I said gently. I forgave you months ago. That's why I'm not angry anymore. But forgiveness doesn't mean letting people keep hurting you. What do you want from us? Nothing. That's the point. I don't need anything from you anymore. And until you can want a relationship with me that isn't about money or status or your idea of success, we don't have anything to discuss. A commotion near the entrance caught my attention. Emma had arrived with Dad and James in tow. Really? I sighed. You all came to ambush me at my company's launch. We're desperate. Emma cried, mascara running down her cheeks. James lost everything in that investment scheme. The bank is taking our house, and Daddy's company is dying. Please, Maddie, you have to help us. The room had gone quiet. Our guests tried to pretend they weren't watching the drama unfold. I looked at my family. Really looked at them. Dad, gray and deflated without his usual power. Emma, designer clothes now slightly worn, desperate for a bailout. Mom, torn between pride and need. No, I said firmly. No. Dad's voice cracked. I'll make you all a different offer instead. I pulled out my phone, pulling up some photos. This is Carter Financial Services. They're looking for experienced advisors with community connections. Dad, they've agreed to interview you for a senior position. No guarantees, but a fair shot. I swiped to the next photo. Emma, the local arts center needs a fundraising coordinator. With your social skills and event planning experience, you'd be perfect. James, my friend's construction company is hiring project managers. Real work, fair pay. You want us to work for other people. Emma looked horrified. I want you to earn your own way. Like I did. Build something real. Find out who you are without the fancy titles and borrowed money. And if we refuse, Dad asked stiffly, then you'll figure something else out. But you won't get a dime from me to maintain the lifestyle that made us all so unhappy. Mom stepped forward, surprising me. The Arts Center, they really think Emma would be good at fundraising? Yes, because she is good at it. When she's actually trying, not just playing the perfect daughter. Emma wiped her eyes, smearing expensive mascara. I don't know how to be anything else. Yes, you do. I took her hand, the first time we touched in months. You're smart, capable, and determined. Use those qualities for something meaningful instead of just appearances. Dad cleared his throat. The position, at Carter Financial. When's the interview? Tomorrow at 10. Don't wear your Rolex. Show them your experience, not your ego. One by one, they nodded. Not happy, not grateful, but perhaps thoughtful. As they left, Mom turned back. Your company, it's really amazing, Madison. I'm sorry we never saw. I know, I said softly. Maybe someday you'll see me too. After they were gone, Pete appeared at my side. You okay, kiddo? I looked around at my publishing house, at the dreams being born, the stories being told, the lives being changed. You know what, Pete? I really am. Sophie came running back, waving her notebook. Ms. Bennett, Ms. Sarah loved my story. She said maybe someday it could be a real book. I knelt down beside her. Want to know a secret, Sophie? Every real book starts with someone brave enough to tell their story. Like you. Like all of us. Later that night, I sat in my garden reading nook, working on my novel. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. I have an interview at the Arts Center tomorrow. Any advice? I smiled, typing back, be yourself, your real self. The lottery hadn't just given me millions. It had given me the chance to show my family and myself what real wealth looked like. Not the money in my bank account, but the courage to finally be exactly who I was meant to be. And that was worth more than any number could measure.